Hi, my name is Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer and professional traveler. Today I'm going to show you how I set up my tarp tent using trekking poles and maybe that tree stump over there. How do I set up my tarp tent just using trekking poles, guy line, the little tarp and everything in my sleeping tarp? Well, that's what I'm going to show you in this video today. But before I do that, if you wouldn't mind, just hit the subscribe button and that'll help bring me bring this information to you. And also leave a comment and let me know how I'm doing and give me some other ideas for videos. Thank you for subscribing and leaving a comment. So let's get right down to it. So I actually camp under tarps more often than not, unless I'm in Antarctica or some other, or Denali or some other crazy bad weather. I just use my tarp. I've got the integral sill nylon tarp. If I'll remember, I'll put a link below to that. And I've got my very old but well-used Lecky titanium trekking poles, and that literally becomes my tent because when I'm backpacking, weight is everything. Now, trekking poles, I consider those, hey, I'm going to use those anyway, so I drop those. But my tent, I think this thing is, I don't know, 7 ounces, not even half a pound. And then this sheet of plastic's just something I bought at Home Depot or Ace Hardware, wherever. I do have these nice little stakes here. Let me grab those out just to show you what I've got going there. You can use almost any stake you want, but these are what I've converted to because the old stakes I had, I actually ripped the cap off, so they were lighter, but they've got frozen in the ground. So these, I was just camping last week, and they got frozen in the ground, but I was able to get them out. So you can see they're very light. And what I'm going to do is just show you my procedure for setting up my tarp tent. So I'm going to cut this maneuver, and we'll get right back to it. Okay, so I'm going to get my tarp out of here. Now, one thing I do is I do not just throw my little pouch on the ground. I put this in my pocket, wherever my pocket is, and I zip it up because when you're camping, if you really want some suffering and waste a lot of time, the best way to do that is to throw stuff on the ground. So don't do that. Little things can cause you a lot of heartache. But literally, this is just a 5x7 tarp, nothing too crazy. I have slept in rainstorms, hail, snowstorms in the Rocky Mountains and the Sierras and the desert and all over the place. But what I do is I just use, well, there's a knot in the line, so I'm going to do a speed up here. But what I'm going to do is I literally am just going to tie the apex of my frame to these couple of stakes, and I'll show you how that works. But also, before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my little trick here. Is at the apex of my frame here, all the ropes are tied up. I have 2 lines that keep my tarp stable, and I just have 2 permanent taut line hitches attached. And all I do is wrap those over the trekking pole, and then I cinch them down just like this, and cinch them down, and there become my 2 lines for setting up my tarp. Now I'm going to use both trekking poles, so it's a little more annoying to do compared to if you have at least 1 tree or something to tie this up. It's a lot easier to set this tarp up. But I'm going to do a little bit of a speed up here just to show you the process. And it's a little bit of fiddling, but I'm assuming that I won't have a tree or anything. I'm just in a bare field. That's the worst case scenario of how to set this up. So let's get started. There's this. Now I always take off my stakes off of my lines just because I don't want them to put holes into my my tarp bag, which means it is inefficient. So what I do is, I don't know, I've never come up with a perfect solution. I've got my taut line hitch here. I don't use those plastics, little lock things. taut line hitch weighs 0 ounces. And then I just simply put it through here. And I don't tie a bow tie. All I do is just a simple overhand knot like this. Dun, 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 dun. And that's literally all you need, is just a simple overhand knot. Okay, and then I will do the same on this one. And as you can see, this is going to be a bit of a process. So this is for the minimalist setup. I would say arguably the lowest weight. It works pretty well considering, you know, considering where you are and what you're carrying and all that. So once I get those set up, then I will take 2 more stakes and I'll grab my other trekking pole over here. Now, as you're doing this, you might discover that you're going to have to make some adjustments, and that's pretty normal. It is pretty normal, but it's just part of the way it works. Now sometimes your preset knots will get shrunk down, and so I'm going to do this in real time just to show you that sometimes you got to do a little bit of struggling. So I'm kind of showing you the worst case scenario here. You got to throw those down because this is taking a long time. There we go. Now that's all tightened around there. And then same sort of thing, because what I'm doing is I'm just taking this right out of the bag as though I didn't plan or anything, because really I didn't, and just to give you a realistic experience of what this is like. Now, if you're doing this when it's cold or weathering, and you think it's going to be weathering, I highly recommend getting everything set up well beforehand. And then I'm going to have to do a video on how to tie a taut line hitch with a quick release loop, but we'll do that for another video. But I've tied so many taut line hitches in my life, it's no big deal. All right. There we go. 1 taut line hitch there. And then again, I just tied this in a simple double overhand knot. That's all you need. You do not need anything more complex or impressive. Okay, so there you go. Just to show you here, taut line hitch to tension, overhand loop, and voila, there you go. So assuming I've got the location that I want and my ground is flat and all such things, I can simply put, now I've got some breeze, this makes it more interesting, and you just literally do the caveman thing, grab a rock, because nobody ever takes a freaking hammer or anything. And will you smash your fingers occasionally? Yep, you sure will. Now one of the keys, this is going to be the back, is I don't really care how spread out the lines are because it is the back of the tarp. But on the front, the spread is more important. So I will show you that in a moment. And this is literally, like I said, I've camped in all sorts of joyous weather over the years. All right, maneuver things around here just a bit. Okay, so the magic key for the entrance, wherever your entrance is going to be, is getting these guy lines really spread out, because otherwise you're going to crash into them every time you get out of your tarp. And as you can see, it's a bit of a process. So if I can stake these into the ground at all, it makes my life a lot easier. And usually when you're doing this, they will fall down, and you'll just deal with it. It's not that big a deal. Okay, there we go. All right, caveman that in there. Okay, now I can set this and reset that a bit. Jimmy it in, so there you go, that's halfway done. Now, you gotta make sure I have set up the tarp upside down, this one holds it up a little bit better. Woohoo! Yep. And as you can see, it's easy to trip, so do be careful. Now, ideally, you would put all these stakes in the corners and get that all ready before you get going here. As you can see, now normally I would do this and get this all prepped before I go out, because I don't want to suffer. But I want to show you what, again, the worst case scenario is for getting this done. So even though it's ultralight, I would argue it's not very efficient. So that is a thing. For tent setup speed, yeah, and then there I'm using a taut line with a real quick release loop, and that makes it easier to take this apart in the morning. But I've gone to just using the string here again. Now, one of the things is you have weight versus efficiency. Now, my Coleman dome tent, my sun dome tent, all right, that's about right. My Coleman sun dome tent is arguably faster to put up. However, it weighs a freaking ton compared to this setup here. Man, this didn't go well at all, did it? Can you still see me? No, okay, good. There we go. Dum, dum, dum. Okay. Here we go. Now, if you don't know how to do the taut line hitch, this is probably the most useful knot, even more than the touted Boy Scout bowline knot. Even though the bowline is handy, I can't remember the last time I actually tied one camping, because more often than not I need adjustability. And if I needed ultra secure, I would use a figure 8 on a bite. That's vastly superior to a bowline, that's for sure. All right. Now I'm not going to stake these completely in the ground, simply because, in the matter of efficiency, here we go. Now, fortunately, these taut lines over here stayed pretty well. Now, if the weather is bad, I do add a couple of extra lines to the sides to tie them out, simply because the sides of my tarp can blow around. But I've lost a couple of my stakes when traveling, and as a consequence, I don't have enough. So I need to hit up the local camping store and get a couple more of these stakes. Now you might say, Aaron, seriously, this is what you've camped under in snowstorms and hail and lightning and rain? Yep. Now you might end up where you're right next to rocks or something and have to maneuver around, and that's okay. That's a very normal experience while camping, which I have to admit is kind of annoying, but there you are. So you can see what the real-time setup is. Now, if it is storming and raining, we'll make some adjustments, but there you go. And I can adjust the trekking poles and then adjust the lines based on how high or low I need my tarp. And I'll put this in my pouch and my Ziploc here too. And so I literally, again, assuming it's not storming Norman, just simply pull my cloth out. Now you notice this isn't a $50 footprint or anything insane like that, because I think that is an insane amount of money to spend on a plastic ground tarp when it's going to get holes anyway. And so thusly, there you go. So there you have it. There is my tarp tent. It's kept me dry and everything. If I do get pretty bad storms, I will lower this down and put my other lines out. So if it's really raging, I will lower this tarp to the ground and I will lower these. So what I would do is and pull this and shorten this up a lot. In fact, if it was really stormy, I'd put this super steep, so I'd have to change my my taut line to be really short, but I can put this almost near the ground, so it's cozy inside, but that keeps all the weather off, and that really works. So there you go. And typically what at night I do, depending on the lines and everything, I might move this over. And that way I have a better entrance into here. And then simply crawl in, get in my sleeping bag, and enjoy my camping. There you go, works pretty well. And as you can see, it's blowing around. So if it's really weathery again, I would drop my lines and put them much closer just to drop that down. That's how I set up my tarp tent. Okay. And here is the setup with the tent, made super steep to keep the weather out. So if I needed to say, hey, things are really bad, I mean, I'd normally have a stake, but just for convenience sake, just literally lash it down. So this is the bad weather level. You just crawl in there and it totally works. So it's a bit of a crawl because it's so tight, but as you see, it could be in an Oregon rainstorm and it would totally work. So no problems. It's a little bit cozy, but it's airy. It's not like a bivvy where you get soaked. I've never been wet in my tarp, ever. And that's the thing about this setup, is it's plenty of air. There's plenty of air that blows through, so I never get soaked. I never get condensation on me. Down sleeping bag stays totally dry. In a tent, you have to open the windows, keep it dry. In a bivvy, you're gonna get wet. In the tarp, unless it's like horizontal rain, and then I'll just set it up as a little wall sort of setup, I've never gotten soaked from condensation ever in a tarp tent. And there you go. That's how I set up my tarp tent. I've used this thing for 15 years, a long time. It's pretty easy to use. A couple of knots, hammer things in. Used it in the winter, -20, -30 in the summer, in the sun, in the desert, just about everywhere. It's a great system. Ray Jardine, I'll put a link below to his book. He uses a little bit of a cantonary sort of tarp, but that's what he uses to do the AT, the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide, Pacific Crest Trail, just about everything. It's very easy to do. My name is Linsdau. I am a polar explorer and professional traveler. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Good. Just checking, and support me on Venmo, PayPal, and Patreon. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Thank you very much.